Coming out. Please have a seat. And I want to thank my wife for that wonderful introduction, but I also see about 20 of my brothers and sisters in the back, all from Texas that just drove in. Thank you for coming. And my son Robert. He tells me, Dad, you tell the same joke over and over again, and you still laugh. He's just amazed that people still laugh at the same joke. So I'm not going to try the same joke. But what I will tell you, though, is that I did stand on the Senate floor for 10 and a half hours for your right to be left alone.
The only one that...
Justice Brandeis said that the most cherished of rights among civilized men and women is the right to be left alone. You do have a right to privacy. People say, well, it wasn't written in the Constitution. It doesn't say privacy. But what it does say in the Constitution, in the 9th and 10th Amendment, it says that those powers not given to the federal government are left to the states and the people. And that those rights that you have, they're unenumerated. They are not specific, they're undefined, but they are not to be disparaged. You do have a right to be left alone. And it's incredibly important that we not give up that liberty, not give up that freedom for a false sense of security. People say, oh, well, we need to give up that liberty. That's the only way we'll ever be safe again, is to give up all of our private information. But when people tell you that, think about the times in history when government has abused that prerogative, when government's done the wrong thing. Think of how the government rounded up all of the Japanese Americans in the time of World War II, and they were incarcerated, they were interned simply because of the color of their skin and the way they looked, not because they had done anything wrong. Think about what happened during the Civil Rights era when we collected phone information, not only from Martin Luther King, but from civil rights leaders across the country, illegally, because they were dissenters, and we decided we weren't going to allow that dissent. Think of the time people have had their information taken up because of their political beliefs or their religious beliefs. Think of recently what we've done with the IRS to target religious groups and conservative groups simply because of their ideology. You see, there's a tradition. It's a long-standing tradition. It's not just in the last 50 years or 100 years. It really goes back all the way to 1215, to the plains of Runnymede, when they talked about the Magna Carta limiting the power of the king. They wanted to say to the king, you're not omnipotent. We're not going to give you power. We're going to constrain the king. We're going to restrain the king. When we got our Constitution, the same thing. The Constitution was about not restraining the people, but restraining the government, not letting too much power accumulate in the hands of one individual. This is the true distinction in this race. We have the front runner, who we've seen again on the polls, is leading. But listen carefully to what he's telling you. He's saying that he's rich, he's smart, just give him power and he's going to fix things. But many of us are distrustful of power. We think that power is corrupting and that power, absolute power, corrupts absolutely. We don't want too much power to be in the hands of one person, Republican or Democrat. We object to the president having too much power, and so did our founding fathers. Our founding fathers gave us a republic. We're not a democracy. We're not majority rule. And when people say, oh no, democracy is a good thing, think back to the days of Jim Crow. How did we get Jim Crow laws of segregation? Through majorities, through majority rule, because we didn't have an idea that there were certain rights that were inviolable even by a majority. There's nothing sacred or sacrosanct by a majority. A majority could take away all of your liberty. You have to believe that there's something that even a majority is not allowed to take. That your rights come from somewhere, that your rights pre-exist all government. I think our rights come from our Creator, and I won't let any government take my rights away. well, you're just overreacting. Government's not going to do that to us. But I am worried about this. I am worried about what happens if we give the government too much power. We had a debate a couple of years ago in Congress about something called indefinite detention, kind of like internment, but allowing an American citizen to be detained, incarcerated forever without a trial, without a lawyer. Basically getting rid of a jury trial, something we've had for hundreds and hundreds of years. Your precious right is not to be put in prison unless by a jury of your peers. So we're having this debate on the Senate floor, and I don't like to name names, but it was with a senator from Arizona. So we're having this debate, and I look at John McCain, I'm mentioning I look at John McCain and I say, do you mean that you would allow an individual to be sent to Guantanamo Bay, an American citizen, without a trial, without a lawyer? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. And I was like, really? Kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? You can see how that would be rife for abuse, that if one party were in power, they might think the people that are from the other party are dangerous. Or what if you get someone in power who says, well, I don't really, like the Jewish people, or the black people, or the brown people, or the white people. You can see how bias would enter into it. The protection of bias, against having unequal application of the law is the jury system. But I also thought in that moment of the times when we've gotten it horribly wrong, when we've made big mistakes. There was a bombing about 15 years ago. It was called the Centennial Square bombing, the Olympic bombing. And within moments, they caught one guy. His name was Richard Jewell. And they said he had to have done it because he met the profile. He had glasses. I see a few of you. He wore glasses. He was an introvert. He had a backpack. I see a few backpacks. And he was actually solicitous to the victims. Now, I don't understand why being nice to the victims fits profile, but they said he did it. All of the television cameras said Richard Jewell is guilty. Only problem was he didn't do it. The networks ended up having to pay him millions of dollars because they slandered him. But what I ask you to think about when we think about how important the law is, think if Richard Jewell had been a black man in the South in 1920. He might not have lived the rest of the day. This is why we have laws, so we don't allow bias to enter into the application of the law. The check and balance is you get a lawyer, you get your day in court. We've got to be very careful that we don't give up our rights in our fear of terrorism. Terrorists cannot defeat us on any battlefield. In any pitched military battle, we will defeat them every time. They're terrorists because they're weak. They cannot beat us at anything. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to defend ourselves. They will attack civilians because they're weak. So we should defend ourselves, but we shouldn't succumb to fear. We shouldn't transform and lose who we are as a people because we're fearful of terrorists. The rest of the crowd on the Republican side and many on the Democrat side are saying, no, we have to give up some liberty to be safe. The problem is it's a false allure of safety. It's a false allure to say, you will be safe, there won't be any more attacks if you just give up your liberty. For the last decade, your government's been collecting every one of your phone records. Now they say they're not looking at it. The problem is the same people who tell you they're not looking at your phone records are the same people who lied to Congress and said they weren't doing it at all. James Clapper came before the Senate and he was asked by Ron Wyden, a senator from Oregon, are you collecting our phone records? He said no. He just lied to us, which is perjury and punishable by time in prison. He lied to us that they weren't collecting at all, but now they tell you, trust them, they're not looking at your records. But let's take them at their word. Are you fine with that?
No.
To me, this would be equivalent to the British soldiers coming and knocking on the door, bursting in and saying, we're come here to get your papers, but we're not going to read them. See, my guess is the minute they break my door down, I'm still pretty happy. But your castle which are supposed to be protected from government and from intruders, your castle is no longer just your house. In fact, I would say my house has very little private in the way of papers, but my cell phone has everything that I do on a daily basis. It's very private, and you know what? You know what I want to tell the government? My cell phone and your cell phone is none of their damn business.
Yeah!
We are headed rapidly towards bankruptcy. We borrow $1 million a minute. We have, by the end of President Obama's term, we will have $20 trillion in debt. You could argue that we are bankrupt. Our debt equals our national economy. We make about $19 trillion worth of goods. We have a $19 trillion debt. Many economists say when your debt equals 100% of your economy, that you actually are at a point, a tipping point, where you may not recover. Many economists say that we lose 1 million jobs a year from our debt. So those of you who are in college and thinking about getting out and getting a job, realize that when the government consumes so much money, there's less money left for all the businesses to create jobs. It's as simple as that. You have to decide, do you trust that government can create all these jobs, or do you want to leave more money in the economy of Iowa to create jobs? It's really that you have to decide. I would make the argument that you have to have some government, but that you should keep government small for two reasons. One reason I call the liberty argument. The liberty argument is what Thomas Paine said. Thomas Paine said that government is a necessary evil. Sounds pretty harsh, but what did he mean by that? In order to have government, you have to give up some product of your labor, some of your liberty. So if I tax you 100%, you've given up all your liberty, you have no income left to spend anything. That would be an enormous government. Let's just think Bernie Sanders and what he wants. All right? He's a little bit less than 100%. He only wants to tax 90% of your income. But really, I think you're 10% free if they take 90% of your income. Problem is government doesn't do things very well, so that money also will be spent on things that I don't think creates productive jobs. So if you want to maximize your liberty, you want to minimize the size of government. You want to keep government small. But there's another reason for keeping government small, and I call this the efficiency argument. This is what Milton Friedman put forward. Milton Friedman said something that I think is very wise, very true, and hard to refute. Milton Friedman said that nobody spends somebody else's money as wisely as their own. So what happens in the federal government is once you give them money, do you think anybody in the federal government lies awake and says, oh, darn it, I lost $500 million today? No, they don't lay awake. It doesn't bother them because it's not their money. Now, you can say there are good people in government, but the question is, even a good person in government, will they ever care about it as much as if it were their own? So decision-making is always better. If I ask you for $1,000, you're going to think long and hard. If I had to earn $2,000 to have $1,000 left over, and I have to decide whether that's a good investment. You may lay awake at night for $1,000, but nobody in government does. So they don't make as wise a decision because it's just not their money. So we should keep as much of the money local, keep as much as the government local, and what we should do is have a small government. What I say is I want a government so small I can barely see it. Many of you are here either making your decision on who you'll vote for in a Republican primary, but it's just as important that we nominate somebody in the Republican primary that can actually win in the fall. Iowa is a perfectly split state, almost right down the middle. Sometimes Democrats win, sometimes Republicans win, but it's right down the middle. I think we need a candidate that excites Republicans, but that also welcomes new people into the party. I think we need a bigger, better, bolder party. I don't think we have to give up an iota on what we believe in. Balanced budgets, low taxes to stimulate the economies, less regulations coming from Washington, all the things that you have heard from Republicans. But I don't think that's enough. I think you got to get new people. I said we need a bigger, better, bolder party with tattoos, without tattoos, with earrings, without earrings, with long hair, ponytails, short hair, black, white, rich, poor. We need a bigger party. And so what we have to figure out is, what is it about our message that will attract the people? I've become thoroughly convinced that big government is bad for business, the economy, and growth in jobs. But I also have become convinced that big government's also not very good with our criminal justice system. I think it's really gotten out of control. I said the other night in the debate, and I'll say it again, we have a war on drugs that has disproportionately impacted African Americans. I'll fix it.
Yeah.
Khalif Browder was a 16-year-old black kid from the Bronx. And when you see on television, you're like, what are these people angry about? Who are they? Maybe I can't relate to it. I grew up in an upper middle class family. I wasn't poor. I don't understand what's going on. But I look at the people who are angry in the streets and they're protesting. I want to know, why are they angry? I'll tell you why they're angry with the story. Khalif Browder was a 16-year-old black kid from the Bronx. He was arrested and accused of a crime. He was put in Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial. No trial for 3 years. 2 years of that, he was in solitary confinement. That should not happen in America. I think when we become the party of justice again, look, the Republican Party was the party of emancipation. We are the party and have been the party of civil rights. But we need to be the party of justice again, and we need to compete for every vote in America, from the south side of Chicago to downtown Houston to rural Kentucky. We need to compete for every vote. I'm going to do it, and I hope you'll be there with me. Thank you so much.